Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Seth Morrison, lead guitarist for the band Skillet, is brought to you by Compassion International, releasing a child from poverty. That's what Compassion International allows. 7,000 plus church partners in 25 countries, 66 years sharing Jesus with every single child. Over 2 million children known, loved, and protected through the work and being released from poverty through the work being done by Compassion International. This is where you can come in here and make a difference and help a child in need. It's $38 a month, and you can sponsor a child and make room at your dinner table to release a child from poverty. Safe water, education, medical care, safe housing. That's what it's about with your $38, food, education, and medical care, all being done in the name of Jesus. Sponsor a child today over at compassion.com/sports spectrum, compassion.com/sports spectrum, and release a child from poverty today. Today's guest on the podcast, I love it when we go into the music world, and our guest today is Seth Morrison. He is the lead guitarist for the band Skillet. He's also a gigantic sports fan, specifically in Ohio, with the Cincinnati Bengals, Cincinnati Reds, and his Ohio State Buckeyes. And this is really a lot of fun for me. I've known Seth now for about 7-8 years, and just been a real treat to get in touch with him, to connect with him. I think we actually connected, if I remember correctly, on Twitter, and just a mutual love for sports, and obviously a mutual love for music. And I'm a big Skillet fan, and so it's really neat to have Seth on the podcast. And we talk in the interview about his love for sports, but then we get into his walk with Christ, but even more, what it's like to be a rock star in many ways and be touring with a band like Skillet. And Skillet has such a unique place in the music world right now because they have a large Christian audience, and they are all Christians, and their music is shaped by their faith. But they have a very large mainstream audience, secular audience as well. And I've actually witnessed both of those. I saw them in concert when they were playing with Third Day, and it was very much a Christian audience. I also saw them play a solo show in Mohegan Sun in Connecticut here, and that audience was probably at least half just rock and roll fans. And it was quite the interesting dynamic. And I love that Skillet has a place and kind of footprint in both places, in the world and in the faith-based community. So really fun stuff here with Seth. We talk about that, and I ask him if they have any new music coming out, and they certainly are working on something. So you have to wait till the end of the interview to hear what's coming up there. But Seth Morrison's our guest. Had a lot of fun talking to him. He's the lead guitarist for Skillet, and here's his interview on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen. Seth, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. We've been talking about this for a long time. Finally doing it.
I'm glad to have you on, and I like when we mix it up and don't just have the athletes on, because I think there's a lot of different intersections of sports and faith in different places, including the world of music. But let's start in sports for now, because I've known you for a little while, and you are one of the biggest sports fans I know in the music world for sure. And you live and die with your Cincinnati sports, the Bengals and the Reds. Let's start with the Bengals, the NFL. Let's start it this way. What's your earliest memory of rooting for Cincinnati and the Bengals?
I guess it just kind of came just out of my state pride. I've always been a huge Ohio State fan and Reds fan. But as far as the Bengals go, I just love my state. I love the state where I'm from, and the Bengals were the closest team, about 2 hours away from where I'm from. So I guess I really started coming in to my Bengals pride. I guess I would have been around 5th, 6th grade. I remember I was outside. It was I guess it would have been around the time of the NFL draft. I was outside. I was just in like middle school, playing football in the side yard with one of my best friends. And I remember we went inside. The Bengals were on the clock for the pick. I remember when they drafted Jeff Blake.
Oh yeah.
And then
The quarterback.
Achilles Smith, and those years. So those are the years I really remember, like really coming into to loving the Bengals. And my first Bengals game was a Bengals Steelers game. Um, when Jerome Bettis was still there, and we got throttled by the Steelers, of course. Nothing much has changed there, but 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 I'm live or die. I still love it, and we've been fortunate to have some good seasons within the past, I call it the Dalton Green era. Just I'm hoping I'm hoping with the changes going on, we can get over that hump and maybe at least just win one playoff game and then see what happens from there.
I always say when I talk to sports fans, and obviously I talk to a lot of them, that when you say you're a Bengals fan, or a Browns fan or certain teams, I have a real good buddy of mine, Paul Gray, who's a Lions fan, and he lives and dies with the Lions. And my
Yep.
brother Damien is actually a Lions fan. And when I say that they're fans, people's kind of eyebrows kind of just stand up a little bit. And I'm like, well, if I tell you they're a fan, that means they're really a fan because they're not going to choose to live in sports misery. And I say that probably to
Right.
you as well about the Bengals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's it's definitely a passion. I love all things Ohio sports, and the Bengals are no different. I find, well, there's a lot of times come Sunday, I'll text you and I'll be like, well, what do you think? Before the season, I'm like,
Oh yeah.
what's your expert expectations? We've done that a lot before. And, it's, I'm one of those fans that just, you get frustrated and you're like, oh, I'm not watching blah, blah, blah. And here I am next Sunday. We'll be sitting 3-7 and I'm right there. I'm right along with them watching. And so, yeah, I'm definitely live or die.
The Reds are another team that you love. I know you've gone to many games in Cincinnati watching them. And you were born in '88 and they won a World Series in 1990. Now, I'm old enough to remember that year. You're not
Yeah.
probably. But
Well, I'm not, but that was the wire to wire team. I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, oh, they were a great team. And they had the Nasty Boys and Eric Davis and Chris Sabo and those guys. But again, I think I read it, two playoff wins in 27 years, 29 years. If
Mm,
you're a Reds fan again, you're a diehard because it's tough to root for a team that just hasn't had a lot of success, but you stick with it.
yeah. Yeah. And I would say, no, I love the Bengals and I'm very passionate, but I would say maybe just a little bit more, as my Reds passion is probably up the ladder a little bit. You know, I, that started probably even a little earlier than the Bengals. I remember my grandma, her always talking about, like, Pete Rose and Johnny Bench and that era, the mid '70s, Big Red Machine,
Yeah.
and then my uncle and my grandmother taking me to Reds games, and back in the, I guess, mid late '90s when they were still at Riverfront Stadium, and that's when I've always loved baseball. I played baseball when I was a kid, and as far as my Reds passion goes, I'm telling you, man, I tell people, like, there's just something about baseball. It's like you can just follow, and especially a market like Cincinnati. You normally have a window, maybe of 5 years, 6 years, where you can really compete and be good, because we can't afford to wait for guys to hit free agency and to just go buy everybody and have a
Right.
good team. So you kind of, I embrace the rebuild every time it happens, and I love it. Every year I'm following what's going on in the minor leagues, following spring training. And like during the spring and summer months, it's one of my favorite things when I'm off the road, even when I'm on the road. But when I'm off the road, I look forward to, 6:10 Central Time, which is where I live in Nashville. The warm weather, you can grill out and have the baseball game on. It's just, I love it. And it's just, there's something about, it's deeper than baseball. It's just, I remember going to all those games when I was a kid with my uncle and my mama and my cousin, and playing baseball in the side yard. And funny enough, when my wife and I started dating, my wife Hillary, I really got her into the Reds, and she's kind of spoiled because we started dating in 2010, and that was like the first year in quite a long time. They won, I think they won 90 games that season. We won the NL Central, so we went to, like, man, I don't know, between the 2010 and 2012 season, we must have went to 40 some games. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it was actually quite a big. I don't know. It was quite a big part of our dating years, and so just to allude a little bit, to fast forward, we got engaged in 2012. We were on the Winter Jam tour. We were headlining the Winter Jam tour, 2012. We're playing a show at the arena, U.S. Bank Arena in Cincinnati, which is basically backs right up to Great American Ballpark. So I'm like, man, I was like, we've gone to so many games together. I feel like our relationship, and just spent so many times driving to the Reds games, and so I set up a private tour, and that we actually got engaged in the Reds dugout in in an empty Great American Ballpark.
That's awesome. I love
So
that.
I don't know. There's just so much. It's baseball, but it's deeper than baseball for me. So yeah,
So
and as we talk, I'm pretty pumped about what the 2019 season could be. So we'll see. We'll see.
this is the time of year when everybody has a shot, right?
That's right. We're in
Well,
first place.
exactly. We'll talk in the summer, and I'm sure it'll be like, oh, here we go again. I'm a Mets fan,
Oh,
as you know, and it's the same thing every year. It feels like the Mets are
yep.
there's hope, and then it's like, oh, here we go again. It's been a long time.
Yep.
So Seth Morrison's here, our guest on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You talked about going to baseball games with your family as a kid. What about faith? Where did that start with you? Your faith in Christ is obviously central to who you are. Where did that take shape for you? When did that start to become a thing for you?
Yeah. Well, quite honestly, it always has been. I don't have I come from a family with very strong faith. It's kind of like one of those things that's just always been embedded in me. I don't have I don't have one of those like crazy, like fallen, you know,
Yeah,
hooked on
conversion story
drugs
or
or
whatever.
conversion stories or
Yeah.
anything like that. So my family, my dad's a musician. My dad can play about everything with strings. It's pretty crazy, but
Yeah.
so from my earliest childhood memories, my parents had a country gospel group, with my aunt and my uncle and another pair of close friends of ours, and that's really as far as like my youth. I was on a bus every weekend, like they did the weekend warrior thing, out playing different churches around our tri-state area of Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and my brother played drums in their group, so that's kind of like all I remember. And I just remember it being so fun, as a kid, getting on the bus and just I've always loved that. And I remember I accepted Christ. I was about 7 years old, and actually in my cousin's bedroom. And that's kind of like my first. That's where everything kind of started for me. Like I said, I've always known, but as far as actually accepting Christ into my life, I was 7 years old in my cousin's bedroom, and yeah, that's it.
Did you want to always be, kids or what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a baseball player. I want to be in a rock band. It sounds like, you kind of, wanted both of those as well, especially as a sports kid. But as you
Yeah,
grow up, was that always a dream once you started getting, enjoying the
yeah,
guitar?
yeah. I think when you kind of come into those years of, like I said, I started playing when I was 11, 12, or around that age. When you start playing, you're not really thinking about that at that age. You just love it. You just play. But then, as I got into high school, and I was still playing and taking it more seriously, and you start getting around. I mean, it hits everybody at a different age, but you get around that sophomore, junior year, or whatever, and people start asking you what you want to do, and the only thing that ever came to my mind was like, oh, I want to be a guitar player.
Yeah, I want to do music.
That's what I love. That's what I want to do. And everybody's always like, well, you need to have a fallback plan, and I don't discourage that by any means.
Right.
Um, but any time I tried to think, well, what is my fallback plan? Like I just never could. I don't know. Nothing ever brought me, I guess, a joy like music did. Um, so I went to college. Fast forward out of high school, I kept playing. Just kind of played locally, played in church. Um, and then post high school, I went to college for the college I was there. It was on quarters, not semesters, so it was like, I don't know, 3, 4 months.
Right.
And you know, I I just didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I was just taking basic classes. And my thought was like, oh, I don't. it's like, I don't want to just keep throwing money away. Like, I knew people that were like three years into college and still had no idea. And now they have debt, who knows how long they'll be paying that off. And that freaked me out. I was like, oh, I don't want to just throw away money. It's like, I'm going to stop college for a bit. If I figure out something I want to do and I know that's what I want to do, I can come back and that be the focus.
Yeah.
So my dad owned a auto parts store and garage in our hometown for 40 some years, I guess. And so I just worked full time for him. Worked with him at his auto parts store, still playing at church and playing locally. And those were some crucial years for me, just because if you want to do music, it's not like I always say this, but it's the truth. It's not like if you want to be a teacher or you want to be a nurse or you want to be a doctor, whatever, that's what you want to do. You know what you got to do. You go complete the classes, you complete grad school, you get that degree, you go get that job, right? Well, music's not quite like that. So, I just honestly, man, just a lot and a lot of prayer and just honestly trusting God that if it's what I felt called to do. I mean, it's truly what I felt called to do. But I mean, I would be lying to you and lying to everybody listening if I didn't say there were times where I honestly thought that this is just not going to happen, and I'm just going to have to bite the bullet, go get a job at, I don't know, UPS or something like that. And there were times I really thought that. I mean, life changes, curveballs thrown at me. Um, that I didn't foresee, but now that I look back, that were for the better, that help kind of just free the path, if you will, to get to where God needed me to get. And I'll never forget, I was working at my dad's auto parts store one day, and I heard a worship song come over, I don't know, like the radio or something, or the TV, and it just, man, I just got flooded, like overrun with the Holy Spirit, like. And it was like one of the most vivid times I remember this happening, but I just started weeping and like just felt something come over me. I remember having to go back to the bathroom at my dad's shop, and I was just weeping, just weeping. And I'm like, what is going on? I was like, and I just remember God speaking to me saying, if you just hold on just a little bit longer. Because during that time, I was really battling. I'm like, I just felt like I had a dead end road. I was just like, I'm 23 years old. I was like, I have no college degree. I'm thinking like I could have been done with a degree by now. I'm working at my dad's auto parts store. It's like, what have I done? Like, well, where am I going? And I was really battling that during that time. And I just remember when the Holy Spirit came over me, and I just remember him speaking like as audible as you can imagine, just saying, just hold on just a little bit longer. And I kid you not, man, it was like 3 months later is when all the Skillet stuff started coming to be. I mean, it gives me chills, right? It's
great.
Yeah.
How does the Skillet thing come together? Like, do you get a call from John, and he's the lead singer there, and suddenly this thing kind of happens? Like, how does Skillet even become a thing for you? Because they're pretty established at that point still when they call you.
Right. I mean, this was April 2000, or late March 2011, early April, sometime in that range. So yeah, so I actually had heard about it from a friend, just kind of randomly text me saying, "Hey, I heard that this they may be looking for a guitar player, and so maybe you want to kind of check in on this." And I'm like, "Well," I was like, "Okay." So kind of rewind a little bit. During this time when I was talking about all this, I had made some trips to Nashville. Just, 'cause like I said, life had thrown some curveballs. So I'd had some friends move down here, and I really just loved coming down here to get away, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I had made some trips down to Nashville. And as most jobs are, as you know this, I mean, a lot of jobs are focused around networking. Well, music is definitely like that. If you're wanting to play, if you're wanting to be known, you got to network with other musicians. And I had done that a little bit. I tried it, back when It was back when MySpace was still popular. I had sent, his name is Tim Rosenau, and he's guitar player for TobyMac, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd sent him a message on MySpace just saying like, hey, this must have been 2008 or nine. I said, hey man, I'm going to be in town. I was like, I'm a guitar player, and I was young. I was green at that time, but I love what you do. I'd love to meet up sometime if you can. And funny enough, he sent me a message right back, and that doesn't always happen. He sent me a message back saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm going to be in town. Let's meet up." So, the pessimistic side of me even thought like, "Okay, he sent me a message back. I'll get down there. I'll message him. He'll
Yeah.
never write me. He'll never write me back." So, but long story short, we met. We met at a Starbucks. I remember the exact Starbucks. We talked for about an hour, and he just kind of mentored me on, what it's like, and but being on the road, being in the industry. And I remember him praying with me at the end of our meeting, and he just said, God, I don't feel like us meeting here is by chance. He's like, neither of us have any idea what could come of this, but I pray that you would just, keep us in touch, help us remain friends, and that's kind of where we left it. So about yeah, I kept in touch with him, and like any time that I saw that Toby was going to be close, I would go hang out with him at shows, and we just we became friends through that. And I never abused the relationship. I never abused like, oh, I know Toby Mac's guitar player, blah blah blah.
Right. Yeah.
And it really just meant something to me that he, and now being in this for 9 years or however long I've been here, but bigger part of a decade, I really respect it even more that he took time out of his time home to come meet me for an hour and a half, and mentor me on that. So anytime Toby was close, I would go hang out, and we kept in touch. And of course, when I heard that Skillet may be looking, he was like my one contact. He was like the one person I knew in the industry. And so I sent him a text, and I said, hey, I was like, I heard about this. I don't know if this is true. Can you maybe check in on this? Well, the funny thing is, not a year, or maybe just shy of a year before that, Toby and Skillet had done a tour together. So there was a relationship there, familiarity, having just come off of a tour together. So he's like, man, he's like, absolutely. He's like, I'll look into it, or I'll have Toby reach out to John. So he did. And before I even heard back from Tim, I had an email in my inbox from our production manager, who was kind of helping the guitarist search, if you will. Just like a mass email where they had gotten certain people's email addresses, just stating like, hey, as some of you may have heard, Skillet's looking for a guitarist. This is true.
Right.
And here's what we would like. Just a video audition playing these songs, and a testimony a little bit about yourself. And so I I was at work, and I told my dad, I was like, hey, can I have the afternoon off? So I went to my home church in Wheelersburg, and I got my cousin, who always helps me with anything tech related, because he's really good at it. We got a camera, and I immediately got to work on my video. And again, the pessimistic side of me was like, it's like, man, a band of this caliber at where they are in their career, I was like, surely they've probably found somebody before they even started searching. You know what I mean? So I almost didn't do it. I almost did not even do the video. I was, you just have that side of you that's like, there's just no point. I'm just wasting my time. And so I went into like the little side room at my church where we, always meet before Sundays, and would pray before we played on the worship team. And I remember going into that dark room, feeling pessimistic. I was by myself, and I just remember praying like, God, I was like, you can see my heart already. You know that I think this is not going to go anywhere. I was like, but I feel like you're telling me to do this. I'm like, so I'm going to do my part. I'm going to make this video. I'm going to send in my resume, and you take it from there. That was my honest prayer. I said, you take it from here, and I'm just feel like I'm going to do my part. And so I did it. I sent everything in. They at first brought somebody else out to to just see how it would go, somebody they had in mind. And just to kind of fast forward through all that, I thought I didn't get the gig, and I was at peace with that. Like, I honestly was at peace with it. I just remember thinking, like, okay, that's cool. It's like, I did it. I felt like I was supposed to do it. Who knows what may come of it, 6 months from now, a year from now, I didn't know. And 2 months later, I'm just going about my day, working at my dad's auto parts store, and I get a phone call. I'm getting ready to get off work. I'll never forget this. I always got off at 4 p.m. It was like 3:50. I get a phone call from an area code that I don't recognize, and I never answer those. I don't know about you. I just never answer those phone calls.
No, I always let them go to voicemail too.
Exactly.
Or if they need me bad enough, they'll text me.
Exactly. So I'm like, oh, it's just spam. So I didn't answer it, but it left me a voicemail. So I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I checked the voicemail, and it was our production manager, and he goes by the name of Scotty Rock. And the voicemail says, "Hey, Seth, this is Scotty Rock, Skillet's production manager." And at that time, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" Yeah. So I obviously immediately call him back, and he doesn't answer. So I hang up, wait 5 minutes, and call back. I call back again, and he answers. And it's very funny now, but it was misery at the time because they had just started a tour. It was a mainstream rock tour with Stone Sour, Theory of a Dead Man, and Hailstorm. I'll never forget, that was my first tour. But they had already started the tour, and he was like on an off day somewhere on a riverbank, and it was windy, and I could make out like every sixth word he was saying. And the only thing I got out of that conversation was like, "What's your availability and when could you fly out?" That's all I heard. And I just I played it cool and pretended I heard everything he said. And then I remember him saying at the end of the conversation, like, "I'll call you tonight." So I went like the next 5 or 6 hours just knowing that somebody asked me when I could fly out, and I had no idea what was going on. And my anxiety, was at peak levels, obviously. But that evening, I was in my living room watching Sports Center, funny as I still do to this day, most nights.
Yep.
And Scotty called me back, and John, our lead singer and founder of the group, they were on a conference call, and basically just alluded to the fact that, well, hey, we always liked your audition, and yours was amongst one of the first ones to come in, and he said Tim and Toby and everybody speaks very highly of your character, and he said, "It's clear you can play. We saw that in your video." And everybody speaks highly of your character, and basically just wanted to know, like, look, we'd love to see how this goes. Can you fly out in a couple days and kind of learn the ropes? The prior guitar player had come back out to just kind of, make sure I knew the parts. And so I just basically followed in the shadows for a few days, just to kind of see what it was like. And yeah, man, that's kind of a summary of it. But a few days later, I played my first show, and everything went well. I finished out the tour. Everything went well. And John came to me at the end of that tour and said, "Hey," he's like, we really love you. We love having you out." And he's like, we want to keep you on for the summer. And it's funny now, but he said he wanted to keep me on for the summer. And at the end of that summer, never said anything else, but I'm still here 9 years later. So I guess I'm good.
They call that a temp to permanent job in the job industry, right?
Exactly.
Seth Morrison, great story here on our Sports Spectrum podcast. All right, I want to ask you a couple of just being in the band questions. The first thing I want to ask you about is touring a bit, and touring and traveling around the country. Like I said, we've known each other a while. I've been able to come to a few of the shows, and it feels like Skillet is just meant to be a live band. You guys rock it out when you're in person and you see them. So much energy and effort. I don't know how you put the energy that you guys all put in, and it just feels like you played like 4 quarters of football when you guys are finished. Explain what that's like to be there on tour in front of a crowd and just rocking it.
It's I know it sounds cliche to say, but it is still such like a surreal, like out of body experience. It just it really is. Even 8, 9 years in, it's still just such a dream come true. Like I don't know, I can't even begin to stress it. But I remember having dreams, and I mean it states in the Bible, right? I truly believe that God gives us visions through dreams.
Yes.
And I remember prior, this was my dream. This was everything I'm living right now is my dream, and then it exceeds that. It's but I remember having dreams, like very vivid, real dreams that I was on a stage playing for an arena full of people. And I remember when I was having those dreams, just how satisfying and fulfilling it felt in the dream, like I was living out what I was purposed to do. And then I remember waking up and I remember being just so upset that I woke up, you know?
Yeah.
And man, I've lived that dream. I mean, everything that I ever imagined it to be has come to fruition, and it's just every way about it. I mean, just the people I get to do it with too is what makes up half of it. Because I honestly don't think I could do this if I were living it and doing, because you're basically living with these people. I
Yeah.
mean, that you become family. It's not just an hour and a half on stage and then that's it. You're together year round, all most hours of the day, except for when you're sleeping. And
Yeah.
even then, you're still on the bus with living with people. So I mean, I just gotta brag on John and Corey, who kind of are the founders of Skillet, and all of my bandmates and crewmates, and just the people I get to do life with. It's just I couldn't do it if I felt like I was doing it with people that are fake, and I can say that just doing it with John and Corey has been such a blessing. Just learning from them, and they're just you do life with people that make you want to grow deeper in the Lord, and that's just such a blessing. But yeah, it's just, man, I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. I've been able to everything I grew up going to festivals around Ohio and shows that, like, obviously I'm a big Ohio State fan, so going up to shows at like the Schottenstein Center on Ohio State's campus, like I remember seeing Van Halen there when I was a teenager, and
Yeah.
I've been able to play that arena 3 times now and play all these stages that I just dreamt of playing. I've been able to play them. I've been all over the world, all over Europe, Russia, South America. Um, been I've became friends with some of my biggest guitar heroes. Just the fact where they're a text away or a call away. It's nuts. It still blows my mind just what I've been allowed to do just because of God placing me in this spot. And I never dreamed I would be able to do it on this level. Even if I thought that a career in music would come to be, I never dreamt that I would be able to do it on the level that God has allowed Skillet to reach. I never would have imagined it, and just brushing shoulders with who I have, and just even in the sports world, just the sports fan I am, just becoming friends with some people. It's just it blows my mind, man. Every day, every week, every day, every hour. Just when I stop and think, if I would have thought 10 years ago this is where I would be in 2019, I still can't believe it.
I love
It's
it.
crazy.
I love that. A couple more questions here with Seth Morrison on the podcast. So it's interesting to me because your touring schedule has seen you with bands like Third Day, which I saw you guys when you were with Third Day
I remember that.
in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, maybe 5 years ago or so. But you've been on, and like you said, festivals and places and touring with bands like Korn. And so it's a big difference in music and style and messages, even the audience. I'm just curious, how do you adjust to different types of crowds that you play to? How do you adjust to that? Not only from your music is your music, right? So you play the same songs, but there's got to be I don't know. I remember when I think I went to see you guys in Connecticut once, and you had a very vast, I'm trying to describe this for people listening. You had an audience that wasn't just Christians and it wasn't just hard rock band fans. You had a mix. And so John always makes a point, I think, from the stage to share his faith whenever he can and however he can. And you can hear and sense there's a little uneasiness with certain crowds because it's not your traditional Christian music crowd. How do you guys balance all that?
That's a very great observation and question.
Maybe not an
Yeah,
easy answer, right?
right. Well, yes and no. I mean, that's honestly one of the things that we love is yes, you are correct. So, like, I would say it's split down the middle. 50% of our touring is probably in the Christian market, and 50% is in the mainstream rock market. And it's not kind of the Skillet norm would
Yeah.
be we may be on like a Christian tour where it's us and Carrie Job or us and For King of Country, whatever the case may be. And we get right out of that tour and we go into a tour where it's us and Korn or us and Shinedown or us and Nickelback, whoever,
Yeah.
mainstream rock bands. It's really like flipping a switch. We kind of go back and forth between those two things, and it's just great. Like I was saying, like just what Skillet or what God has allowed Skillet to do. It's just the vast array of the audience. It's nuts. It's ages 5 to 75.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's everything in between. It's Christians. It's non-Christians. And you are 100% spot on. And you do have to adjust. I guess like you're right. The songs are the songs, and I think a, a lot of John's writing is done in a way to where if you're a Christian, you know where he's coming from. But if you're not a Christian, it feels very it still feels very spiritual and almost it still makes non-Christians feel something, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
But as far as like a show standpoint goes, it's you do got to, I guess, change the way you deliver it, I guess would be the way to say it, in front of Christian crowds. It's it's easier to just kind of lay out what maybe a song is about or just lay out your faith. Whereas in a mainstream rock crowd, you can, John always still says maybe what the song Hero is about to him, right?
Yes.
Um, but what we always find, and it continues to happen, is just even backstage, because obviously, as you can imagine, maybe those backstage worlds are different than what the backstage world's going to be like on a Christian tour, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's just crazy. Like, yeah, I feel like some bands, like before we've toured with them, are always maybe afraid, like, okay, we got this band that's kind of labeled as a Christian band. They're going to come in and be preachy at us and all this stuff, and that's not really the truth. We always find that, like, in the day and age that we live in 2019, really all you have to do is if you're living biblical truths and what you believe and what the Bible says, and that's how you come across, you're gonna you're gonna be an example far beyond what you even imagine you're being. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times we find that people have been like, okay, it's like there's something different about you guys. Like they see obviously John and Corey and the band, they're married, right? And then they have their two kids on the road.
Yeah.
They see that, and people are like, you have a functional family in this world that's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like, what's going on? How do you keep that together? And it's just we just find that the opportunities just arise to minister to people, even when you're not seeking it,
Have
And
you seen someone, I don't want to just say come to Christ, right? But somebody who's been open in the conversations that you're able to have on the road, maybe in a secular environment about your faith, or even seeing John, Corey and John have
Mhm.
that story or that opportunity to share. Have you guys seen that a lot by touring in a sort of
Oh,
mainstream
absolutely.
place? Yeah.
All the time hearing stories. But one of my favorite stories, I think, and there's a ton like this, but one of my favorite stories is there was a husband and wife. Well, I guess they weren't a husband and wife at the time, but they were working like in the pornography industry.
Mm,
And the story goes is just they heard the song. It was around the time the album Awake came out,
yeah.
so like Hero was getting a lot of sync on with NFL and a lot of different maybe ESPN and all that those networks. And
Yeah.
they heard the song Hero, and they just really liked the song. And this is kind of what I was alluding to with, like, even as far as like the live aspect. They heard the song Hero, really liked the song, and looked up the band, looked up the song, what the song was about. and it just did something in them, and they radically got saved, radically came to Christ, quit the pornography industry, got married, and that's just like one of those radical stories, you know. And there's a lot like that. But I sit here and I'm like, man, that is nuts, just from hearing a song on like Monday Night Football. You know what I'm saying? It's just, and it's like that in the as far as being a live band, like you said, goes too. Like we're out doing these mainstream rock tours, maybe a Korn fan comes, or a Nickelback fan comes, or whatever, Shinedown fan comes, and they haven't, maybe they've heard of the band, but they don't really know a lot about us. Maybe they see the show and they think like, man, they are a legit rock band and they put on a great show. I love their songs. You know, you go home, you look up the band, you see interviews, you start seeing what's kind of under the curtain, if you will, and you can really have an impact on somebody far beyond what you even realize. And that's you know, that's kind of something I always try to remember just in day-to-day life out on the road, is you can you never know how you're impacting somebody even behind the scenes.
So true. And I think it's just being faithful and obedient to where God's called you in your guys' walk, is just being faithful in what you do, and letting God kind of work through the hearts of people and the way that he wants to work.
Right.
I have to ask you this. This is always one of my favorites, and you kind of alluded to it. Give me a wow moment for you in being a part of Skillet, where it was either somebody you got to meet or play in front of. You mentioned the venue at Ohio State. Maybe that's one of them, but or even someone that you found out was a fan of Skillet and you got to meet him and you were like, oh, cool, this is awesome. A name that
Yeah.
you can name, because maybe there's some that you can't name, but give me a moment where that took place for you.
Well, how about I do two sides of it? I'll do like
Yeah.
the music side of it. So like, I guess one of my I have a lot of guitar heroes, but like just one of my personal, like one of the guys that I just grew up, just was my favorite player, was his name is Mark Tremonti. He was a guitar player for Creed,
Yeah.
a founding member, and still has a band called Alter Bridge. But I remember when I first joined the band, we were playing a festival with Alter Bridge, his band, and he's like, as in my generation, he's a lot of people's like rock guitar icons.
Right.
Like some people it was Eddie Van Halen, some people it was whoever. Well, he's mine, and I remember meeting him and playing a show with him, and just since that time, we've played probably a dozen shows with him, and we've become friends. And we've gone around to music stores when he's had a day off in Nashville shopping. It's just
That's
that's
cool.
so surreal. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so that on the music side is really cool, really, really cool. But man, as far as sports goes, oh man, the list is big. I mean, I guess as far as like, I know a lot of baseball guys, just funny enough, because I always say it's really funny. It seems like a lot of athletes love music and are just infatuated with the world of music and touring. They want to be in the music world, and a lot of like myself,
Oh yeah.
I think it sounds so cool to be. There's a lot of parallels in like what we do in the baseball world. On the road, 100 and however many days a year, and hotels, and I just think it sounds so cool to be able to go to a park and take batting practice every day. So, but I've been able to, meet a lot of guys like Heath Bell. He was a closer in the majors. He's retired now, but he was one of the first guys I met that was a Skillet fan.
Yeah.
And then just from him, it's just, gosh, Scott Shebler, he's on the Reds now. Michael Lorenzen.
Yeah.
There's a pretty big list. Anthony Bass, he's one of my friends. Chris Davis, the Orioles. I just, and I always think it's just so cool. Like just to be, I was actually had the opportunity, my buddy who was with the Reds for quite a few years, J.J. Hoover, a relief pitcher, he introduced me with the Reds chaplain, and I actually had the chance to go sit in on a Bible study last year with the chaplain. Steve Sisko is his name, and
Yeah. I know Steve.
yeah, great guy, great
Yep.
guy, and Scott Shebler. That's actually where I met him that day, and it was just really encouraging. Just we, in the Bible study, we just talked about life, and that's when we really found there's just so many parallels in what what we do, being on the road, just the struggles that come with that, whether it be being away from family or whatever. And so I really liked connecting with Scott. He's a really good guy, and it's just really cool to be able to share a lot of similarities, even though we're in different lines of duty, if you will. There's a lot of parallels.
Oh, absolutely. This has been great. Seth Morrison, the lead guitarist from Skillet. Let's close it with this, and we ask this to all of our guests on the podcast. This has been really great, and I appreciate your time and your storytelling. What is God teaching you right now in this walk of life? What is the Lord impressing on your heart during the season that he has you in right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just think, especially in our day and age, it's so easy just to become complacent or stagnant, I guess, and especially in my line of what I do. And I would say it's equal for athletes as well too. It's so easy just to become lazy. You got people honestly just kind of, waiting on you all the time, and it's very easy to become lazy, especially in your walk with Christ. It's very easy to become stagnant or complacent. So I've really been trying to be focused. I want to go deeper in the Word. I want it to become more of an everyday habit for me, where I'm diving into the Word, whether it be whatever I can do. If it's 10 minutes, if it's an hour a day, there's really there's really not an excuse not to. I mean, in 2019, I feel like if I have time to open up my phone and surf Instagram for 15 minutes,
right,
with the Bible app, I have time to open up the Bible app, and I have a ton of devotionals at my discretion, and it's as equally as easy. I could open up my phone and read 20 minutes of the Bible instead of scrolling Instagram. Or I'm a gamer. I love playing PS4. If I have time to be playing PS4 when I'm at home, I need to give God 30 minutes of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's really, I guess I would even be willing to say that's what I've felt convicted about easily. But two, I always feel like I'm a stressor in some senses. Like I always panic. Like, it's like where will I be in 20 years, 25 years from now? Maybe when I'm not touring as heavy. Like what am I going to do? Blah blah blah. And I feel like God's just been telling me too. Like, look, I brought you to where you're at. I brought you here. You never thought you'd be here. So just enjoy the ride that you're on, and just kind of it's good to be aware maybe of what your future and whatnot. But
Sure.
I feel like I just need to tell myself, enjoy this ride. Not a lot of people get to experience this, and just trust me with the rest.
That's good. I didn't ask you this, but I presume as we close here real quick, you guys have new music coming out sometime in 2019, right? Skillet, we'll expect some new music from them?
That's right. Yeah, we are, as we speak here, we're kind of wrapping up in the studio, and everything is kind of moving forward. So hopefully a single sometime this summer, and then an album soon to follow, maybe later in the summer. We're very excited about it.
That's awesome. He is Seth Morrison, the lead guitarist for Skillet. It's been a good chat with you, my friend. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and we'll catch up hopefully soon. Sounds good, man. Thank you so much. And many thanks to Seth Morrison, the lead guitarist for the band Skillet. Check him out on Instagram at MorrisonSeth, and just grateful for him to be a part of this podcast. Love the stories that he told, and I like kind of getting a peek behind the curtain on what it's like to be in a rock band and to travel and what that's like as a musician. It's just a different world than I'm used to, and it's a lot of fun to hear Seth and hear others share their stories on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Again, give Seth a follow on Instagram. Let him know that you heard this episode of the podcast at MorrisonSeth, and looking forward to new music from Skillet as well. Their last album came out in 2016 called Unleashed, and they got a new album coming out in 2019, and it'll be awesome to see what kind of music they have cooking and what comes out later this summer. So keep an eye out for new music from Skillet. Many thanks to Seth for joining us, and many thanks to Compassion International for sponsoring and partnering with us here on this podcast. For $38 a month, you can release a child from poverty. It's that simple and that impactful when you go to compassion.com/sportspectrum, compassion.com/sportspectrum. Make room at your dinner table for one more $38 a month. Provides a child in need with food, education, medical care, and vocational training. It's all done in Jesus' name. That's the best part of this whole ministry. 2 million kids being impacted by the work being done at Compassion International. Make room at your dinner table and become part of the solution, releasing a child from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum and sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. You can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at sports_spectrum. And you can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And check out our website as well, sportspectrum.com. It has articles every day on the intersection of sports and faith, and also has a daily devotional at 6 a.m. to get you started right in the Lord. And also every single podcast can be found there, all 260 plus of them at sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.